Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. As Unawakened of Champions is expecting quite large influx of new content, game modes and other things, rank up questions are becoming more and more frequent, and I have decided to revisit several videos that a lot of you seem to enjoy. And we're going to start with 6-star champions I think are well worth ranking up Unawakened, because quite often we are all faced with situations like that where champions that we do not want to rank up, we have awakened, but they're still bad champions. Like, look at Rhino, look at Daredevil. Even though they're awakened, you don't necessarily want to rank them up. And then most of the champions that we could potentially consider ranking up happen to be unawakened. Well, luckily for us, some of the champions do not really need that awakened ability, and they're plenty powerful. Or almost as powerful as they would be with their awakened ability. Now, typically, the goal is to put about 20 to 30% of champions' max power, max abilities, max usefulness in the signature ability, as I have heard from Kabam developers, but sometimes they definitely kind of miss the mark, and quite frequently the signature abilities don't really matter at all whatsoever, really. Or at the very least, they don't matter, let's say, offensively. And they could potentially make the champion defensively more powerful, but you're not really ranking the champion up for that reason or purpose. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go over to Auntmay's website, and we're going to go over every single class, and I'm going to point out the champions that I would personally recommend people to take up, even unawakened, at the very least to rank 2, at the very least to rank 2, but most of them also quite possibly to rank 3. So, another thing to note is, unlike the last video, the same subject I uploaded about 11 months ago, we have had pretty much a full year of buffs and new champions being released. So in many classes, we have significantly more champions now that are worth ranking up. Therefore, I will not be able to go in too big of a detail, but I'll still try to elaborate on that as best I can. So here we can start with the science class, and the science class has a definite favorite. Human Torch, the awakened ability is borderline useless. I have had Human Torch awakened for, I don't know, 2 years now, and I don't recall a single time when that awakened ability actually mattered, especially considering most quests have about 6 fights per path, and yeah. If you're going to use Human Torch, you kind of have the plan ready. This is the fight that I'm going to use my pre-fight on. Now, there are some instances where it can be helpful, but even in the longest quests that we have in games, such as Abyss of Legends, I used Unawakened Human Torch. I knew when to use my Awakened ability on Mephisto, and I saved it for that, and it was fine. You know, that Awakened ability really is not all that important. It does not matter that much. Now, we only have iHulk now as well. iHulk definitely initially was not necessarily considered as a top-tier rank-up option. Now he is, because he can put in a ton of work in plenty of difficult, tricky matches, and then obviously he has some additional bits of utility where his healing can't be messed with, and the best aspect of him still inevitably is the fact that he deals a ton of burst damage. But now with the Overseer synergy, he can be used as a legitimate counter to reverse controls. But I'm trying to say iHulk is awesome, and that signature ability is not. Signature ability is neat to have. It gives him a few more aspects here and there, but since it's also directly tied to his current gamma, it's not necessarily the most reliant one. There are some neat effects, but again, they're not super reliable, and I have never really had many or any fights where that Sig mattered. I ranked him up unawakened myself, eventually got him awakened, and there's hardly any difference. Now, one champion I have kind of changed my mind is Spider-Ham. I do think Spider-Ham has to be awakened for defense in order to put the poppers on the opponent when he evades and all that other stuff. But in general, you only real offensive kind of good things that you get is that 2-second duration increase on Spider Nonsense cap at 10. But that really isn't all that important. So at this point, I'd say that Spider-Ham is also a good option to rank up unawakened for sure. And then to move on, Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative is a champion that you do want to get awakened. The awakened ability does make him better. I have an unawakened Mr. Negative, and he's one of the champions that I want to awaken the most. But He is plenty good, plenty powerful, plenty versatile, and you can do plenty of good things with Mr. Negative, even Unawakened, in my personal opinion. So definite recommendation there as well. You know, Immortal Abomination, kind of similar. He is more effective, he is more powerful when he's awakened, but even unawakened, you can benefit from the most important factors of the champion. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic gets significantly better with his awakened ability. It's kind of similar to Ghost, but also you have so much in his kit at its base that even unawakened Mr. Fantastic, I think, is much better rank up than majority of the science champions in the game, awakened or unawakened. That's how powerful I think he is. And perhaps lastly, Spider-Man 2099. Spider-Man 2099, again, a champion that I have ranked up unawakened myself. I do want to awaken him. He gets better awakened. There's no question about it. But the main function, the most important functions that he can do, you will be able to do even with unawakened Spider-Man. You will be losing out in the damage output department. But you're still going to be able to solo alliance for bosses, so that says it's worth to me. Let's move on to the skill class. Skill class, we have, obviously, Black Widow Deadly Origins. Honestly, Black Widow Deadly Origins is a champion where her kit, about 60-70% of the things don't really matter. She's a champion where there's a lot of useless things, but there are a couple of things that work and work really well, and she turns out to be kind of low-key more useful than most people initially thought she would be. The key to success with her is super high damage output very early on in the fight without any need to ramp up or do anything crazy. And that's it. And her awakened ability does little to nothing in 99% of the fights. So, Black Widow Deadly Origin, very good rank up. Now, we also have Falcon. Falcon does benefit from his awakened ability, and he does become easier to use. Those 2 seconds and that extra damage does matter. But ultimately, with unawakened Falcon, you will be able to do pretty much every single fight that you can do with awakened Falcon. You're just gonna have a bit harder time doing it, and you're gonna take longer time. But still, Falcon, if you like the champion, is worth considering a rank up. I think the skill champion that, the top skill champion that depends on the awakening potentially the least is Shang-Chi. Only thing you really get from the awakened ability is a bit of burst physical damage on your crits, and that's about it. The champion's functionality does not change. I took this guy unawakened to rank 3, awakened him eventually, but there's hardly any difference whether he was or was not awakened or any of that other stuff. Then we have Hitmonkey, another champion where awakened ability is neat, but it's definitely not needed. If you like Hitmonkey, you should not be shying away from him if he's unawakened. And perhaps my favorite skill champion, which is Mole Man. And the awakened ability, you can notice if you are at low health. You will be doing more damage. But even unawakened, you will absolutely love this guy. And in general questing especially, but for most cases, pretty much everywhere, you will not be missing out on too much. Then we still have Massacre, whose awakened ability, you know, is neat, helpful. Where's Massacre? But again, I don't think it's needed. I think he's perfectly adequate in everything he does well enough unawakened, especially after his micro buff thing. And then we have Kingpin, who does need his awakened ability. It's kind of, again, I think similar maybe to Mr. Fantastic, where you do get a better champion if he's awakened. Mr. Fantastic has 3 signature levels of Sig 1, Sig 65, and Sig 200. Those are kind of like the key signature levels for this champion. But even unawakened, you're going to be able to do majority of the things with this champion, and he is an absolute powerhouse, and he is good enough to be ranked unawakened, in my opinion. So that seals it with the skill class. Let's quickly move on to the mutants. Mutants are kind of tricky because there's a ton of mutants, but I guess we can start from the top. APOC, I think, is the best mutant at the moment in the game, and luckily for us, his awakened ability is quite unnecessary. Another champion that I easily took to rank 3. Never thought about giving him a gem when I had one. I still have a generic awakening gem that I do not think about giving to this guy, because that awakened ability is nice, is neat, is definitely not a deal breaker or something that's absolutely mandatory, and the champion's absolutely insane. Then besides Apocalypse, we still have plenty of other champions. Bishop, I think, is underrated offensively, definitely also a good attacker, and awakened ability is good to have, but he's worthy rank up unduped. Cable, Cable is very popular champion, and his awakened ability does not even matter. Most of his kit doesn't matter. What matters is his synergy with Apocalypse. And if you have APOC ranked, I think Cable is a great rank up, awakened or unawakened. I think Colossus is, at the moment, I'm kind of shifting my opinion. I do think Colossus is worth ranking up unawakened if you enjoy the champion. Then we have Domino and Emma Frost. Both of those, again, I would easily rank up unawakened. Even Havoc, and perhaps to showcase more clearly, a lot of people have questions about Kitty. Do you have to have your Kitty awakened? And the truth is, she does become better if you do get her awakened, but she's extremely potent and powerful, even unawakened. She's well worth the rank up unawakened. Yes, there are significant improvements if you do get her awakened. Like, you can completely shut down all the damage from every source, and that often enough is all the change, all the difference that you need. Because if she is not awakened, you reduce the damage by 80% while phasing, but you still suffer 20%, and 20% quite often is enough to kind of KO you. And then the increased combat power rate, if you get struck, that can be key for absolutely new cheese tactics. So awakened ability is important, but she's just such a beast, even unawakened, that I would not hesitate to rank her up unawakened. Red Magneto, easy rank up unawakened. The Magneto House of X does need the awakened ability more. I personally was and am hesitant to recommend ranking this guy if he's unawakened. It's much easier to recommend ranking up Red Mags. And then past that, Professor X, another champion that definitely does not necessarily need to be awakened. The awakened ability is neat, kind of cherry on top, but he's still a powerhouse, even unawakened. And then when it comes to rest of the champions, I think I kind of went over most of the ones that I recommend. With the rest of them, I would definitely think much harder, like Archangel. I think awakened is much more important, and so forth. So again, to quickly recap, we have APOC, Bishop, Cable, Colossus, Domino, Emma, Havoc, Kitty, Red Mags, and Professor X, all definitely well worth ranking up unawakened. And if you like Storm Pyramid X, then that too, sure, why not? And, well, it's too early to tell for Sauron and the others. Let's move on to the next class, Tech class. Tech class is also significantly changed since I last recorded this video, but let's just go over the first and the queen of the techs. It's Ghost. The thing with Ghost, and specifically whether you should rank up unduped Ghost, well, my answer typically is, if you have a 565 Ghost, then no. I personally think, and have experienced many situations where 565 Sig 200 Ghost was far better and far more useful in Act 7 and many different places than a low Sig rank 3 Ghost. If you do not have 5-star rank 5 Ghost, 100% I would rank up an awakened Ghost, because I do think Ghost is that powerful, that good. It's just that I do also think that awakened ability does matter quite a bit, and if you do have access to a rank 5 5-star, that champion is more powerful overall than unawakened rank 3 6-star, almost always. So that is kind of like my guidance on Ghost itself. When it comes to the rest of the champions, we have Guillotine 2099, an absolute powerhouse, does not need to be awakened. It's kind of nice to have ability on top there. Then besides that, we have Howard the Duck. I think extremely underestimated champion that I am considering as one of my next future tech rank ups, and I have a 5-star rank 5 with this guy, and he does not need to be awakened, but he definitely is quite powerful. Then we have Hulkbuster, I think well worth the rank up, even unawakened. The awakened ability is neat, gives you some regen for the most part, but most of the fights you're not really going to rely on it or need it, so I'd say rank up your unduped Hulkbusters. Now we have Nebula, that is getting increasingly kind of more popular. Nebula's popularity kind of goes up and down a bit, but I do think she's one of those champions where you can reliably and easily rank her up unawakened, and she's going to do what she needs to do. Only thing you're going to be missing out is on some combat power rate occasionally, because it's not like opponent is shocked the entire duration of the fight either. So Nebula, definitely worth ranking up unawakened. Then we have Nimrod. Nimrod does need to be awakened, but it's one of those similar cases where with Mr. Fantastic, where I do believe Nimrod is so strong, so useful, and there's so much on his base kit that he's well worth a rank 3, even unawakened. But, you know, again, he does become significantly better when you do awaken him. especially the ability against mutants when you gain extra armor ups and gain extra charges. And keep note how this ability increases not only potency but duration, so it's kind of like more significant increase than if that would be either one of those separate. But still, is that good, Unawakened, that it's well worth doing. And besides that, we still have Penny. Penny, I think, is definitely also a worthy rank up. Awakened, Unawakened. It's nice to have that heal block. Definitely useful, but still would be a worthwhile rank up, Unawakened. And perhaps the champion that's affected, I think, the least of this Awakened ability, Ultron. Ultron's an absolute machine right now, wrecking havoc in contest pretty much everywhere. And even though it's nice to have that Awakened ability, unless you're gonna take him to Sig 200, which I don't recommend, that signature ability doesn't, well, you barely notice it. Like, again, I ranked Ultron unduped, and I was super happy with my Ultron. Duped him eventually, I think he's now Sig 40, and it hasn't really mattered in any fight. So I'd say Ultron is definitely a very, very good rank up to do Unawakened. And lastly, we have Warlock. Warlock, it's nice to have the degen. Ironically, in last Lions War season, it was kind of better to have your Warlock Unawakened to escape high ground, becoming more spicy. But for most part, you know, Warlock is perfectly capable, even Unawakened, and there is that. Then obviously, if you do like War Machine, I think War Machine is a solid rank up, Unawakened to perhaps Mysterio, if you like Mysterio, but those are not necessarily the top tier options in the class. Like, moving on to Cosmic class, let's take a look at the Cosmic champions. And Cosmic is kind of a tricky bag because most of the top Cosmic champions can do a ton of things Unawakened, but those Awakened abilities matter a lot. My personal valuation of them changes, kind of like, I think, I don't know, how I rank them. But still, for instance, Corvus, do I think Corvus Unawakened is worth ranking up? Yes, I do. If you run Liquid Courage Double Edge, if you're going to get use of it, I do think he's worth ranking up. Do I think his Awakened ability is important? Absolutely, I do. But still, even Unawakened, if you run Liquid Courage Double Edge, I would rank up that guy. Then we have CGR, who I do think relies significantly less on his Awakened ability. I don't think signature level matters at all. But it can be useful to have his Awakened ability. However, majority of the time you go with CGR because of his armor breaks, because of his ability to destroy fights extremely quickly, and there the Awakened ability doesn't really come into play. So he's still definitely a great rank up Unawakened. And then we have obviously everybody's new cheese master, Hercules. What do you do with Hercules? Hercules is an incredible champion Unawakened. But just like Corvus, and perhaps even more so, he gains a brand new dimension when he's awakened. Would I rank Unawakened Hercules? Yes, 100%. Would I do everything I can to get him awakened? Also yes. These abilities are important, but I think even on their base, some of these champions are powerful enough to definitely warrant that rank up. And moving on, we have Null, who I'd also easily rank up Unawakened, even though he does benefit from his Awakened ability fair amount. And besides Null, we have Odin, I think criminally underrated champion, absolutely an awesome champion, and that Sig ability is quite useless. In this case, it really is. And then we have Venom, and still extremely potent and powerful champion, even Unawakened, and Venompool. I'd also recommend ranking up Unawakened. There have been questions about King Groot, and I personally would not rank King Groot Unawakened. I do understand that you still get a whole lot of a champion with a whole lot of a kit, but the reason for me personally to use King Groot in large part is the regeneration, which you can attain by going for level 3s, but that just makes fights way longer than it should be, and I don't recommend ranking up King Groot Unawakened. And then there are some champions that can be ranked up Unawakened, in my opinion, but are not necessarily anybody's first tier options, like Icarus, like Cersei, like Vision Arcus. Plenty of those champions can go up Unawakened. However, they would not be my first options, like Captain Marvel movie as well. Very powerful champion. It's just not necessarily aging well, I'd say. She's definitely not seeing too much of a game presence, I'd say that. but definitely still a powerful champion. Last class, and that's going to be Mystic. And with Mystics, it's actually kind of even simpler than that. Majority of the top tier Mystics do not need their Awaken ability, or do not need it much. Like, Black Widow Clairvoyance Awaken ability is one of the most useless things in the game. I think using this champion for 2-3 years now, I have maybe used it twice, and once successfully, and once it didn't change anything much. There is a very specific matchup with Mephisto where it can be useful, but that's just about it. Dr. Doom, you know, gains new quirks, but Unawakened Dr. Doom is still Dr. Doom, and you're going to be able to destroy everything. Diablo, again, I have rank 3 unduped Diablo. I'd like to get him duped, but even unduped, he's an absolute beast. And on top of that, we have like Longshot. Longshot, if you like Longshot, rank him up. Awakened, Unawakened doesn't matter. In some matchups, Awakened Longshot can be more annoying, and Unawakened can be better even. And besides that, we have Sorcerer Supreme. Again, you get a neat little benefit, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Scarlet Witch Sigil, well worth ranking up Unawakened, just in case you wanted to know. Hood, again, well worth ranking up Unawakened. I think it's easier to point out Mystic champions that absolutely has to be Awakened in order to rank up. In my opinion, that's Tigra. Tigra has to be ranked up. Sorry, Awakened to rank up. Dr. Voodoo has to be Awakened to rank up. And those are kind of like the main ones even, I suppose, because the rest of them, and Mojo, if you want to use Mojo offensively, has to be Awakened to rank up. The rest of them are fairly decent without their Awakened abilities. Alright, I think that is it. We went over all the 6 classes. I don't want to keep you guys any longer than necessary. Let me know what do you think about the video, and hopefully this did help out some of you, at least a little bit. See ya.
Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information